The midday sun spilled across the marble floors of the Armand estate, illuminating the silent corridors with a soft glow that made every speck of dust look like suspended gold. In the stillness of that grand mansion, a young housekeeper named Mara Ellington stood trembling near the open safe, her fingers brushing the edges of the ledger she was updating. She believed she was alone. She believed no one would notice her lingering in the office longer than she should. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, Donovan Hale, the millionaire who owned the home, the man known for his icy composure and impossible standards, was standing at the doorway, unseen, watching every second unfold. And the expression on his face was not anger. It was something far deeper, something sharp with memory, suspicion, and a hint of sorrow. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of understanding, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. And please tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The story of how Mara ended up in that moment began many months earlier, long before she ever walked into the mansion, long before she ever imagined such grand ceilings or polished floors. She was a young woman who had once dreamed of becoming a nurse, someone whose life revolved around helping others, until tragedy struck her family with a force she never saw coming. Her mother's illness had drained every last bit of their savings. Medical bills piled high like mountains she couldn't climb, and with no father in the picture and no siblings to carry the burden, Mara was forced to leave school and take any job she could find. Working as a housekeeper wasn't her dream, but it was her lifeline. And the salary at the Hale estate, though demanding, was enough to keep her mother's medications flowing and food on their modest table. Donovan Hale was a man of reputation, one that echoed through business circles and philanthropic events alike. People whispered about his donations, his strict policies, his brilliance, and even his loneliness after the tragic loss of his wife 2 years prior. The mansion felt frozen in a time where happiness once lived, its halls decorated but hollow. The only warmth came from the few staff members who respectfully kept their distance from their grieving employer. Donovan rarely spoke to them, rarely looked them in the eye, and rarely stayed home long enough for anyone to know him beyond cold greetings and quiet footsteps. But Mara was different. She walked the halls with gentleness, tending to the home with a kind of silent empathy. She dusted the framed photographs of the late Mrs. Hale as if acknowledging the unseen grief trapped in them. She arranged flowers in the hallways because she believed scents brought life back into cold spaces. And though she barely exchanged words with Donovan, he noticed her presence in ways he didn't fully understand. Her kindness was a quiet ripple in a stagnant pond, and though he tried to ignore it, he couldn't. One day, when Mara received an urgent call from her neighbor saying her mother had collapsed, her world tilted. She rushed home, heart pounding, only to find her mother unconscious, her breathing shallow. The hospital demanded an immediate, large payment for her admission and treatment, money Mara did not have and had no way of obtaining quickly. She begged, pleaded, cried, but policies were policies. With no one else to turn to, she ran back to work the next morning feeling as though her chest was being crushed. Her mind raced the entire day as she cleaned, polished, scrubbed, and organized. She kept thinking, if I could just borrow something, just temporarily, just to save her. She didn't want to steal. She never thought of herself as the type of person who could even consider such a thing. But desperation paints even the most innocent minds with shadows. So when she found herself near the office during her lunch break, her hands trembling, she opened the door and stared at the safe, knowing she shouldn't even be in that room. She told herself she was only checking if the safe was locked because it was part of her cleaning route, even though it wasn't. She told herself she was only updating the maintenance ledger even though she had already finished it earlier. But deep inside, she was fighting a storm she was losing control over. That was the moment Donovan walked in. He had only returned home to retrieve some documents before his next meeting. He had not expected to see anyone in the office, let alone Mara, near the safe, pale and shaking as though the weight of her world sat on her shoulders. Something inside him stirred, some instinct whispering that this wasn't what it looked like. He watched quietly for a few seconds, unseen, studying the fear in her body language, the way her hands trembled as she wrote numbers without meaning, the silent tears forming in her lashes no matter how hard she blinked them away. He didn't see a thief. He saw a person drowning in something she carried alone. As Donovan stepped into the room, Mara froze, her heart plummeting. She expected shouting, termination, humiliation, maybe even police involvement. Her breath caught in her throat as he approached the safe, glanced at the open door, then gently closed it. His voice didn't rise. His brows didn't harden. Instead, he looked at her with quiet worry, a type of concern she had not felt from anyone in a long time. He asked her what was wrong, not angrily, not suspiciously, but as someone who genuinely cared. And that was all it took for her barriers to crumble. Tears poured down her face as she confessed everything, the illness, the bills, the fear of losing her mother, the moment of weakness that led her into that room. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She only asked for understanding, trembling as she waited for her fate. Donovan didn't fire her. Instead, he did something she never expected. He offered help, real help, without conditions, without hesitation. He arranged for her mother's hospital admission, paid the bills anonymously, and made sure Mara had the time she needed to care for her. When she tried to refuse, he told her that once, long ago, someone saved him when he couldn't save himself, and helping her was his way of honoring that memory. Weeks passed, and Mara's mother slowly recovered. Mara returned to work with brighter eyes, deeper gratitude, and a resolve to live with even more integrity than before. Donovan, in turn, found that helping her had stitched together pieces of his own broken heart he thought would never heal. By the time spring arrived, the mansion no longer felt cold. It felt lived in, hopeful, a place where two wounded souls had offered kindness to each other without expecting anything in return. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps us bring more meaningful stories to life. Before the ending, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Mara's place? In the end, Mara learned that sometimes the world tests us until we nearly break, just so we can learn that compassion still exists. And Donovan learned that even in the quietest moments, kindness can save more than one life, it can rebuild a shattered one.